Hello friends! Welcome back to Mage's Musings. I was thinking about it, and I realized it's been a hot minute since we did a rules discussion. So, let's put the next review cap, which happens to be Old School Essentials number 31, on the back burner for a bit, and delve into some rules. Today, I'd like to go over the order of operations in the Old School Essentials combat system. This is pretty basic stuff, so I'm sure it'll be pretty remedial for most of you. But it never hurts to have a refresher. Roll the opener, and let's have at it! Old School Essentials is a wonderfully pared-back system, certainly not as involved as other versions of D&D where options and actions and counteractions and thises and that's and whatnots and gimmicks are overwhelming at times. But don't let that suggest that OSE's combat system isn't rich and fun in its own right. So, let's go over it step by step and discuss. Determining surprise is quick and easy in Old School Essentials. Once the Dungeon Master determines if there's a possibility of surprise, one or both sides will roll a d6. Assuming no modifiers to surprise, the usual range is 1 to 2 on d6. Some creatures and characters are harder to surprise, so might reduce or eliminate surprise chances, while stealthy creatures and characters increase surprise. But the baseline is 1 or 2 on d6. If a 1 or 2 is rolled, then that indicates surprise. The surprised creature is then unable to react for 1 round while the other side acts. Once that round is over, they may act normally. If there's a case where both sides can potentially surprise, and both sides attain surprise, then surprise is completely negated, and you move on to the normal combat round. But Merle, you magnificently bearded master of the arcane! What about thieves and halflings? How do their abilities interact with surprise, you ask? Well, many DMs have different solutions. But this is how I like to handle it. Thieves and halflings get an extra chance to surprise on top of the chance everyone else gets. For thieves, you have them roll their relevant skill. If they're hiding and stationary, then it's hide in shadows. If they're sneaking up on someone, then they roll move silently. If the roll succeeds, then they automatically gain surprise. The standard 1 to 2 on d6 is not necessary. If the roll fails, then the target rolls surprise as normal. Likewise for halflings. If they are outdoors and hiding in the underbrush, treat the mechanic the same way you would a thief using hide in shadows. Ergo, the halfling gets a 90% chance of attaining surprise. If that fails, there's still the 1 to 2 chance on the d6. If they are indoors, they get a 1 to 2 chance on d6, followed by a second at the same odds if the first fails. Easy peasy? Good. Moving on. At this point, the DM must determine encounter distance, assuming encounter distance isn't already known. Finding this number is fairly simple. If you're indoors or in a dungeon, etc., just roll 2d6 times 10 to find the number of feet the monster is from the party. This is the starting range of the encounter. If the encounter happens outdoors, roll 4d6 times 10 yards, not feet. You can simply triple that number if you want to find the distance in feet. If there is surprise on one or both sides, then instead roll 1d4 times 10 to determine how many yards away the encounter starts. This modifier for surprise isn't printed in the above underground encounter distance, but I do suggest the same. Roll d4 times 10 to find the encounter range in feet for indoor encounters. If your characters are seaborne, then roll 4d6 times 10 to find how many yards away the encounter begins. As above, roll d4 times 10 yards if there is surprise. Once the range of the encounter has been determined, sides can choose how they wish to act. Obviously, players can make their own decisions, but as DM, you want to keep it fair rather than arbitrarily deciding if something is hostile or not. Some creatures will be predicated towards certain actions, which will be an indication. But where there is uncertainty, there are dice to decide for you. Roll liberally, my intrepid DMs. Roll quite liberally and enjoy the chaos that the results bring. Even if the players don't engage in a parley, you can use the encounter table to see the mindset of the creature. If the players choose to engage with it and not fight, you can just re-roll to adjust its attitude. but going in with an idea of its starting mentality helps inform the roleplay. Whether or not players parlay, or you're just rolling to determine a creature's starting temperament, the process is simple. Roll 2d6, with possible modifiers as needed, and compare to the chart. A 2 or less means hostility and an immediate attack. 3 to 5 means the creature is unfriendly, but not immediately hostile. Continued parlay may change its mind. 6 to 8 is a neutral or uncertain response, or maybe simply curious about the group but not approach. A reroll may be prompted if there's further contact. 9 to 11 is indifferent. Creature is simply not interested and will continue doing its own thing. And 12 is friendly. The creature likes the party and may even follow or help. If one side flees the encounter, the other side may choose to pursue. There are various rules for pursuit and evasion in the books. I'll not go into that process in this video, sticking to the basics of setting up the encounter and combat. While not a written rule, I like to impose a -1 to subsequent rolls each time the 3 to 5 range is rolled, until a definitive response occurs and the parlay ends. You ever try continuing to pester someone who's already annoyed? Right. It rarely goes well. Arbitrary modifiers will come up from time to time. The DM should consider things like gifts, circumstances, racial enmity, etc., and apply modifiers as appropriate. And don't neglect charisma. As a DM, you should note the player's charisma modifiers for reference, but for newer players, or players who are used to using charisma as a dump stat and never played the rules properly, I like to regularly check in and ask their charisma modifier so they are aware of the mechanic in play. It is slightly less immersive, but a good way to reinforce to players that it's in use. Once both sides are ready to rumble, you must determine initiative. Initiative, simply put, is the order in which sides act. Those with initiative go first. The standard method for initiative in Old School Essentials is for each group to roll as a whole. This method is quick and effective, allowing for faster play. There is, however, an optional rule for individual initiative where all combatants have their own die. This is a little slower, but has the effect of really mixing up combat for some chaos on the battlefield. In this system, individuals may also add their dexterity modifier to their roll. I ultimately prefer the group initiative system, but it is good to have an alternate option for other sensibilities. In some old school games, before initiative is rolled, actions must be declared by each side before the die is cast. This locks in the actions, creating potential penalties if the plan is changed. Old School Essentials loosen this up a bit. Only some actions require advanced declaration. If you are casting a spell or moving whilst engaged in melee, you must announce it before the initiative dice are rolled. The base 3 actions that require a declaration at initiative are Spellcasting, a fighting withdrawal, or a full retreat. The DM should make their declarations first, and you can keep it a secret or not, that's DM fiat. If you want to keep it close to the vest but still remain transparent, the DM can write it down before the players commit. This isn't usually necessary, as any DM worth their salt won't fudge. If you are using charging rules from Advanced Old School Essentials, I also suggest you require a declaration for that, as well as bracing weapons to receive a charge. Though it isn't written, regarding retreats, I suggest you can only declare a retreat or a fighting withdrawal if you are already engaged in melee. If you're not already engaged in melee and just plan to move, but an enemy catches up to you and engages with you, then you'll have to wait till the next round before you can try to escape. After declarations are made, a d6 is rolled by both sides. The highest result goes first. Ties present 2 options. Either you can say that everything happens simultaneously, or simply require a reroll until there's a definitive winner. I personally prefer to have ties yield a simultaneous result, because it adds a fun layer to combat, but adjudicate according to your own tastes. I will note here that slow weapons, by the book, always lose initiative unless the opponent is also using a slow weapon. What the rules don't define is whether this affects the figure's movement as well. For my part, any creature with a slow weapon still moves on their rolled initiative. They simply lose initiative when it comes to their attack. Once initiative has been determined, follow the order of operations as listed in the Old School Essentials Rulebook. Step 1. Check morale. If a morale roll has been prompted, now is the time to do it. Morale isn't always checked, only when specific events trigger it. The 2 printed triggers for morale in Old School Essentials are the first death on the creature's side, and second, when half of a side's numbers are killed or incapacitated. There are other triggers you may consider adding as needed. Things like losing 25 to 50% of your hit points, or being outnumbered or outclassed. But as written, there are only the two previously mentioned. To check morale, simply roll 2d6, then compare it to the creature's morale rating. Any roll of equal to or less than means the creature's morale is held and they keep fighting. A roll above the printed number means morale breaks, and they flee or surrender as the situation dictates. A morale score of 2 means the creature will simply not engage unless absolutely cornered, while a morale score of 12 means the creature is fearless and morale won't break under normal circumstances. Another aspect about this that I like to move around is I roll morale before initiative is diced, as it may affect declarations. But by the book, you do it first after initiative is rolled. Step 2. Movement. At this stage, the winning side makes their desired movement. In Old School Essentials, encounter movement is listed with each monster, and on the PC's character sheets. If you're using a grid, then the number of squares a figure can move is easily found by dividing their encounter speed by 5. This is how many 1-inch squares they can move on their turn. This of course assumes you're using the 1-inch square as a 5-foot measurement. If you're using minis but no grid, then simply treat every 5 feet of your character's movement as 1 inch and use a tape measure to figure out the distance for the same scale. Once your figure arrives within 5 feet, or an adjacent square, of a hostile target, you are considered engaged in melee and movement ceases. You'll be able to make your melee attack when the combat gets to that stage in the order of operations. If you've declared a fighting withdrawal, you may move backwards, up to half your movement rate, so long as you have a clear path. You maintain your full armor class for the round. If you've declared a retreat, you may move your full movement, but opponents gain a +2 to strike against you for the round. If a figure is moving at normal rates, i.e. not charging or running, it's not unreasonable to allow them to move freely through the square of an ally who is not currently engaged in melee. Treat every second diagonal step as 2 squares. If a character is already engaged and wishes to reposition without ending the engagement, allow a 1 square free step, so long as they are not removed from engaged distance with any enemies within melee reach of them. The rules for fighting withdrawals aren't specific as to whether or not you can make an attack or if it just allows a withdrawal without penalizing your armor class. So, for my games, I've ported in a rule from the BECME system, where you may make an immediate attack against any enemy that enters engaged range with you after you have completed your move. Step 3. Missile Fire. After movement is completed, anyone who is not within engaged range of a hostile may launch their missile fire. Basically, any foe who is more than 5 feet, that being 1 square on a grid, away from the shooter may be targeted. If any enemies are within engaged distance, then the shooter may not use missile fire. Check your missile's range categories. Short-ranged attacks grant a bonus of +1 to strike. Medium range is normal, and long range is -1. Regarding cover, the DM will adjudicate how much potential cover a target has and adjust the armor class accordingly. Complete cover means a target cannot be fired at. Partial cover will yield a penalty to the shooter of -1 to -4 to strike as determined by the amount of cover. When you make your attack roll, you'll want to roll the d20. That's the icosahedron. The higher the result, the better, a natural 20 being the best possible. THACO, for reference, means to hit armor class 0. Simply put, this is the number that any given creature needs to roll on a d20 to hit an armor class of 0. If you're using the classic descending armor class system with THACO, then you take your result after adjusting for any relevant modifiers and subtract it from your THACO number. In Old School Essentials, first level characters have a THACO of 19. So, if you roll a 13, for instance, you will hit armor class 6. 19 minus 13 equals 6. Most old school character sheets also come with an attack matrix where you can compare your attack roll so you can see what AC you hit based on the roll for quick reference. Remember, attacks made with missile fire add or subtract your dexterity modifier. The modifier only applies to the attack roll, however, not the damage roll. Your dungeon master will inform you if you've struck a blow, in which case you'll roll your weapon damage, and the DM will subtract that from the enemy's hit point pool. Step 4. Spellcasting. At this point in the order of operations, casters who have declared spells complete the casting. Note that if you've lost initiative, there's a chance to be hit and thus disrupting your spell. If you're hit with a physical blow that does damage, you will lose the spell. Additionally, if you're subject to an effect that prompts a saving throw before your spell is complete, you will lose the spell if you fail the save. A disrupted spell is completely lost and erased from your mind. Further, you must be doing nothing else, and you cannot have moved. Once you declare your spell prior to the initiative roll, you are rooted for the casting. And finally, you must also have line of sight to your intended target area or specific target. Though it's not stated explicitly, I find that this is also a good place in the order of operations for clerics who are turning the undead. Step 5. Melee attacks. And finally, those who are brandishing melee weapons now make their attacks. As with missile fire, you determine whether or not you've struck your enemy by rolling a d20, the icosahedron, and beating your opponent's armor class. THAC0 minus attack roll equals the best armor class you can hit, followed by a roll for damage. Unlike missile fire, both the attack and damage rolls are modified by the character's strength score. Okay, my friends! So, I've laid out a quick demonstration for you. We are, of course, using these delightful Order of the Stick Monster for Every Season cutout minis. As usual, this is not a sponsorship. I just like them. Our friend Onionbuns Bumblestump and his allies come across some nasty goblins in a forest. Neither side was expecting to find the other, so there's a possibility of surprise on both sides. A d6 is rolled for surprise. The goblins roll a 1 and are surprised, while Onionbuns and his buddies roll a 4 and are not. So our friends have gained surprise on the goblins. D4 times 10 yards is rolled for encounter distance as there is surprise. A 1 is rolled, indicating 10 yards. Translated into feet, that is approximately 30 feet or 6 squares. They use the surprise round to reposition and loose missiles. One goblin is killed in the volley. Surprise ends, and declarations are made. Because one of their number was killed, morale is rolled for the goblins. The goblins have a 7 morale. The DM rolls a 5. Morale holds for the goblins. The DM makes no declarations for the goblins, so they can only perform the non-declarative actions. The mage on Onionbuns' team decides to cast Magic Missile. Initiative is rolled. The goblins score a 3, while Onionbuns' team a 2. Movement. The goblins spread out and attack, some ganging up on Onionbuns' warrior friend. During surprise, Onionbuns had strategically moved to a place where goblins couldn't reach him, so he remains out of melee combat. The goblin approaching him runs short of movement. Missile. Since the majority of the goblins have entered melee, they can't use their spears as missiles. However, the one advancing on Onion is free to throw his spear, so he does. A 12 is rolled. The goblin's THAC0 is 19, and he has +1 to throw a spear at short range, meaning he hits AC as low as 6. 19 minus 13 equals 6. Onionbuns is wearing leather armor, giving him a base AC of 7, and he has a dexterity of 16, which gives him a 2-point bonus to his armor class, meaning his AC is 5. The spear just misses him. Casting. None of the goblins are casting, so this step is skipped. Melee. The goblins in striking range attack. The goblin attacking the mage rolls a d20, scoring an 11. 19 minus 11 equals 8. He hits AC 8. The mage's AC is 9, so he is hit. A d6 is rolled for damage, scoring a mere 1, not killing him, but disrupting his spell. Other attacks by goblins miss. The goblin's turn ends, now it's our friend's turn. The order of operations here is followed as before. The Old School Essentials rules say that you don't roll retainer morale, but if you were to add that in, then you would do it here. Movement. Onionbuns is the only one free to move, so he sprints around to keep his distance from the enemies. Onionbuns is unencumbered, so his encounter movement is 40 feet. Divide by 5 equals 8. Onionbuns may move up to 8 squares on his turn. Everyone else is engaged in melee, so they are locked where they are. Missile. Onionbuns' turn. Having moved, he now shoots at the goblin. Onionbuns rolls his d20, scoring a meager 10. With a THAC0 of 19, that hits AC 9. But Onionbuns is a halfling, granting him +1 with all missile weapons. He's in short range, so that's another +1. He also has a dexterity of 16, granting a further +2 for a total of +4 to strike, making his roll 14. He hits AC 5, which is 1 point better than the AC value of the goblin's AC of 6. He rolls a d6 for damage, scoring 4, killing the goblin. Casting. Our unlucky mage's spell was disrupted, otherwise it would have completed casting at this stage. There's nothing he can do until the next round. Melee. The other 3 characters engage in melee. The first rolls a 12 with a +1 for strength, giving him a total of 13. Goblins have an AC of 6, meaning it's a hit. THAC0 of 19 minus 13 equals 6. A d6 +1 is rolled. He scores a 7 total, killing his goblin. The next fighter rolls a natural 1, which will always miss. The third man rolls a natural 20, which will always hit. No checking of armor class is needed. He also rolls a 7 damage and kills his goblin. And that concludes both the surprise round and the first actual round of combat. With the goblins reduced to half of their original numbers, the DM would again roll for morale. If they succeeded in holding morale again, the goblins would fight to the death. The battle would then continue, following the same steps for each subsequent round. Each combat takes up to 10 seconds of in-game time, so that means there are 6 combat rounds to each standard round, and 10 standard rounds make a turn. It's generally considered to take a full turn to resolve a combat, even if the combat itself only lasts a couple of rounds. The idea being that you take some time after the fight to catch your breath, or bind your wounds, etc., etc. As I said before, while Old School Essentials has a somewhat pared-back system, it's pretty clean and flows well, still allowing for reasonable nuance. It's modular enough that you can adjust it to your tastes. Minutes to learn, a lifetime to master. So, my friends, thus concludes my little exhibition on Old School Essentials combat. I hope this has been insightful. Thank you for watching, my friends, and I shall see you anon.